my recent experience with my fellow councillor over North Harbour Stadium, where the move to sell and demolish that stadium was progressed over some years in secrecy, including the sale of the community fields, and it was only when the Parks Department of Council became aware of that in November that they pointed out, no, you can't sell the fields, because if you sell them, we haven't got enough north of the bridge and we're going to have to buy more anyway. What do you think of that? So it goes to the deficiency of disintegration as compared to the need for us to be one, to manage and be more effective and regain our mana. And I would hope that we're on track for that. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Darby, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I guess the big question here, will all this shift the dial at all? How much will it shift the dial? I think that's the big question. There's an expectation that this will really shift the dial. And I hope so in some areas, but I do have serious questions whether it's going to really nudge things along, particularly in the regeneration space. I actually have concerns about the health of this core organisation, and I'm speaking to you, Mr. Wilson, as Chief Executive. I think the health of this core organisation is not as it needs to be to receive these responsibilities, and they are enormous. I'm saying that, and I'm taking responsibility for that too, because I think it has to be vastly improved if you want to lift and shift those enormous responsibilities over into this organisation. I value, you've heard me say, I value the expertise, the skill, the capability, the capacity that professional governors, say at Eke Panuku, contribute. They're really hard to find. Now, we've heard that an advisory panel might do that. There's no accountability, no responsibility of an advisory panel. That's just a bit of packaging to make it look like, you know, it can work. There is no implementation plan. That's work to be done. And we've heard from our senior staff today that they didn't have time. They didn't have time to look at international models. They didn't land the best possible because they were constrained. It's a pretty honest admittance that we haven't done our job here. There's a lot of expectation, I hear, of greater accountability. I question whether we really have looked at ourselves around this table and thought, do we have the capacity at this table? Do we have the capabilities at this table? I am no expert in some of the areas I might comment on. I'm a generalist in that area of, say, Eke Panuku, but I have engaged with it pretty solidly, as I have in the transport space, but I'm no expert. I rely on the experts of course management, but I also rely on the experts of fellow directors at Auckland Transport and the expertise of the directors at Eke Panuku and Tātaki, etc. I'm reminded of when I first came to North Shore City Council, when everything came up to the governing body on transport, just about everything. And it was unfathomable slowness, but there was accountability, there was transparency, you could see it all. And I remember a staffer with a PhD, I found out some years later, had a PhD. He brought 8 reports over 5 years to put in a bus stop in the Browns Bay town centre. And I think we're at risk, maybe not so much the transport space. I think if we want to have everything landing at this table so that there's accountability and transparency, I think we're at major risk of the momentum being painfully laborious, and it'll cost Auckland. Auckland's got some massive issues at the moment. You know, on the economic front, it's huge. It's pretty stale here. You know, the nation's got some problems, but Auckland should be subsidising the nation like an international city. We're nowhere near that. We've talked about that. We see these State of the City reports come through year after year, and they identify these problems, the work to do, and we can't get our heads around that. We've known for years that innovation, we're way down the ladder. On R&D, we're way down the ladder. We're way down the ladder in attracting anchor businesses. We have so few in Auckland. With Eke Panuku, I am disappointed, and I'll be registering my vote against. But I look at the report today, and Mayor, you're right, that there are a lot of others. There's a lot of other supporting information, but in your mayoral proposal, in those 55 paragraphs, there's actually no evidence in your proposal. It's outside of your proposal, and that's ill-informed. That needs completion. And in today's report, there's a lot of narrative, but it's padded out with rhetoric. And I say this, straight to you, Mayor. It's padded out with rhetoric. It's not padded out with evidence. There's an assumption that there's going to be a lift and shift of talent. Now, that commoditizes people. It does. Lines like that are really just signal a commoditization of people. That talent will find the best place to go. And my guess is they'll find another place because they know this place. In fact, many of them left this place when the Auckland Design Office imploded. Now, that's our background. The Auckland Design Office used to be held up internationally as a guide for this city, and it's lost that juice entirely. That's where we're bringing back the responsibilities. It's no place. I've mentioned the Development Project Office and the problems we've had there. I think the loss of people will lead to a loss of momentum. It'll lead to tired town centres staying tired and a massive miss in opportunity. I think this is a pretty sad day. Overall, I think the Auckland Council structure and culture is going to have to be vastly transfused. It's going to have to be put on a drip to get it up there, to be worthy of doing this task for some time. And culture transformation does not happen overnight. It just does not happen overnight in organisations. It takes time. We can't afford time. We had a good structure. We know it was delivering. And there are little niggles like the Civic Administration building. But the truth is, we got out of jail on the Civic Administration building. And unfortunately, a developer has had great problems making $1 out of it. But those examples have been given. I want to acknowledge the staff for the work that they have done. I don't want to go to Christmas sounding like a Grinch. I am disappointed, but I'm not despondent. I'll keep participating here to make sure that we get the very best out of whatever lands, but I will not be supporting the expunging of Eke Panuku.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor, please.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. Colleagues, you've got to be careful what you wish for, don't you? I want to start with what we've got. And, Auckland Transport have got a new board, not even a year old in its entirety, and it's got central government change. So that will take some time to get through. But I want to acknowledge that Auckland Transport come to this chamber with often a list of things that they're very proud of. I want to talk about Tautaki Auckland Unlimited. You gave me the onerous position of being part of that board, Your Worship, and I've got to say, if you haven't sat in on a CCO board, do it. It will be the best professional development you'll ever get. They lost 35 million, 200 staff, and have still delivered. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing them to keep major events in destination. I think they do a very good job of that. I hope that we listen firmly to Screen Auckland, because I think, again, the work that Tautaki have done with the screen sector in Auckland has been good for our city. Panuku, if I was honest with you, that's my one I'm the most shaky about. But I think the problem with all our CCOs, and respectfully to the people that are behind you in front of me, and that is sometimes the media do great stories for them that show problems in our CCOs. And that actually pulls the confidence that Aucklanders have in what happens in our CCO. If I had $1 for every time I've heard that CCOs are the biggest oxymoron that you've ever heard of, i.e. council-controlled organisation isn't about control, I could probably run the city, fund the city myself. But Councillor Filipaine is right. We have the tools in the toolbox to provide that control, and I think we have all failed in that. Now, that said, Your Worship, you stood on changing the CCO model. And for me, I respect that, and you stood for it, you won, and this is what you're doing about that. So I'm keen to see an implementation model that delivers the efficiency and effectiveness promised. I think February will be a big month for us because we've seen it could look like this, it could look like that, but I want to see clearly that this package of reform will enhance the performance and delivery of the work that our CCOs currently do across all elements. For me, one of the most important resolutions that we're going to pass today is no reduction in service levels or investment, because I think that is important. This is not about a slash and burn cost cutting. It's actually about making us accountable. What makes me nervous about that is that most of us around this table do not have the CVs that our CCO directors do have. But at the end of the day, I don't want to delay, Councillor Darby, one of the reasons I didn't vote for your amendment, I didn't get my hand up in time, is that I don't want to delay the pain. I was with Councillor Baker this morning before 7 a.m. in the office, and he's right, Panuku do want a decision made one way or the other. So I would rather make the decision today, see what happens, but at the end of the day, Your Worship, you live or die by the sword, and I will back you because this is what you've said you'll do, and you are living by that. But I do have some concerns, and I want you to know that come February, when the model comes back and we decide on that, that's when I will really have my say. So for me, today is about taking a step back and saying, right, all of us, what happens in the transport space, but early for transport maybe, but what happens in the economic development space, what happens in the transformational space is on you. If you get it wrong, the people of Auckland will come for you. And there's a lot to be said for that, but there's a lot also to be worried about. So I will support you today, Your Worship, but as I said, I want to see the model in detail, and that will help me finally support what you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williamson, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm delighted that we're taking the first step of a long journey to get some reform. This is not the end of it. In fact, this is really just the beginning of things, in my view. And change management is a really, really important subject. You've really got to identify what bits are still good and make sure we don't lose those. And you've got to park them off and say they're working really well and let's keep them going or enhance them. You've then got to identify the bits of whatever the model you're looking at that is failing and identify why is it failing, what are the problems, how do we get rid of the poor drivers that are driving in the wrong direction and convert them over to being in the good column. And you've got to finally go to the bottom corner box and go, and what are the unintended consequences that might come out to bite us, and make sure you try to do them. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space. I'm a bit sort of jaundiced about sort of professional directors, because there's plenty of examples around the world. Let's forget New Zealand. The best example would have been Steve Jobs running Apple and being worth billions, and a whole set of professional directors brought into the Apple board, including John Scully, who was supposedly the greatest director of any companies in the world. And he ran Apple into the ground, was 3 days, I think, short of being declared insolvent, and had to bring Steve Jobs back and take over the place from a company he'd already set up called Next. So these people who are professional directors paid millions, ran a successful company into the ground. So it's not a guarantee that people that are professional directors will do a great job. I also think that we're buying ourselves some accountability here, because we've had a little bit of an excuse when things are not being done well. Bloody CCOs, you know, they get away with blue murder. Well, we're going to have to take some of the ownership back on that. And I'm delighted that we are, because I think people who are elected every 3 years have to have that level of scrutiny and accountability on them, but also make sure that we are delivering outcomes. So a really good set of KPIs. I think Councillor Darby wanted to know, will this move the dial? We better have a number of dials that we are looking at and reporting on and making sure that we are moving the dial, or there was no point in making this change. Absolutely no point. We want to get better outcomes, more efficiency, more effective outcomes, and things that the public can look at and say, wow, look at the change that's occurred in that organisation, as they have in many other organisations that have gone through proper change management and been really good at delivery. And the last thing I want to say is what I still think is going to be big roadblocks with bloody orange cones all around it to making any further progress, is that we don't do what central governments do when they get elected. When central governments get elected, they go and look at anything that's on the books from the previous regime that they think are causing a barrier to progress, and they clean the slate out. And we have got so much cumulative dross, in my view. I'm going to give you one. I know this will upset a whole lot of people, but I've just been getting Auckland Transport to give me what the costs of TERP are if they are to try to keep doing what this council has forced upon them. A 13-fold increase in the number of cyclists by 2030. Not even close to happening over the years that it's been in place so far, and the forecast for the next 3 years is 3.44 million, 3.52 million, 3.6. Fractional increases. But they're sitting down there saying, we've been given this directive from that council. They're also saying we've been given to have to have 50% reduction in vehicle kilometres travelled, 50% reduction in vehicle kilometres travelled by 2030. We're only 20 days away from 2025. That's 5 years' time.
Impossible.
You are never going to see, I promise you now, I'll bet you to whatever sum of money you want to put up, you are never going to see a 50% vehicle kilometres reduction in the next 5 years. And so we have put all, and this is just one, I could spend the rest of the day if you gave me some time, of all the burdens that we've placed on these people and never gone back and reviewed them and said, that's nonsense, get rid of it. And if we aren't prepared to go back to Jim Stabbuck gave us a wonderful unfunded mountain, and I hope you guys all remember seeing it, over 300 on the mountain of unfunded policies and mandates that we'd come up with, like TERP, which is unfunded. I should give you the financial implications. AT say somewhere between 20.5 and 28.7 billion in CapEx between 2025 and 2035, and a cumulative OPEX of between 4.9 and 5.1 billion. Those are huge numbers that it would cost to implement a policy that this council, prior to us, so it's not of this particular iteration of the council, put in place but didn't put a single dollar of money associated with it. So great change. Congratulations that you're a politician doing something they very rarely do, and that is stand on a particular policy and then implement it and do it. Well done. Long may it continue. But don't everybody get too excited that this is the end all. This is a good start, but there's a whole lot of things we need to do, and we need to measure and be accountable for it and not make excuses if we don't deliver. We will have failed, and we should be prepared to walk away if we fail delivering. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we've heard every possible conception of views on that, and they're all pretty good and informed and well held. Does anyone else feel it's absolutely necessary to burden us with their notes? Otherwise, I'm going to just finish off myself with a short word and go to the vote. The CCO model can work effectively if it's properly executed, and we're here to decide on a model that I believe will allow us to better deliver on our long-term plan, and it is the first step of 1,000 miles. Our different CCOs are making strategy and policy decisions that should be made under our direct oversight, and reform puts us in the best position to make a holistic approach, give us greater visibility across all the group functions, and help us better prioritise where we spend our resources. Economic development is currently delivered alongside work that isn't well aligned. There's an absence of strategic direction with a function delivered at arm's length. And In other major cities around the world, economic development sits at the heart of what a local government does. It has strong political mayoral leadership placed alongside other relevant functions that together leverage council's ability to regulate and influence. For example, last night I was able to connect Zeno, a local space company, to an opportunity with a large Brazilian space company. Panuku model of buying and selling land and supervising the way developers use it to create something is called property development. In case you haven't noticed, there are plenty of commercial property developers out there doing it pretty well, and they don't rely on ratepayer money to do it. Of course, throwing a lot of money in consultants at a project often helps. That's what happened on the waterfront with the investment of hundreds of millions of dollars, but we don't have that pile of cash anymore. The current model relies heavily on recycling council's property, but most of the palatable, easy asset sale options have been realised. Plainly, this means if we retain the status quo, future costs will disproportionately end up on the ratepayer. That's not how real developers work. They work with proper funds and leverage their scale properly, not piece by piece. Iki Panuku has also exhausted most of the easier development opportunities in Auckland where council owns substantial property holdings. The low fruit's been picked. Usually the end developer is a very large firm rather than distributed ownership, local ownership, which is my aim with the changes in-house. We've got to be smarter about the way we do the next generation of urban regeneration projects, and we'll need to consider a different model with or without reform. Iwi leaders and developers in particular tell me they find there are too many doors to open with so many organisations before they can make any progress. By bringing the decisions on land use, planning, economic development, urban regeneration, transport and other significant infrastructure into one place, we can properly align our priorities and investment in a coordinated, strategic way that drives the right growth in Auckland. Look at Drury for an example. We've been tripping over ourselves and our CEOs while achieving very little until the developers themselves organised and came along to get things moving. Drury represents significant growth and economic development opportunity, but it also comes with major planning and funding challenges. And these can be met if our structure provides for greater integration, concentrating the people skills in the same place, instead of spreading that expertise thinly across the group. This approach will help us deliver at greater scale and pace. Our CBD development is a complete misalignment between our organisations. It's our major business district that suffers because the model we operate has failed to address the complex but critical needs of this community. In response to the examples of the Drury and the city centre, we could draw on international models by creating a specialised in-house unit that combines planning, urban regeneration, property and infrastructure skills, economic development and major place-based projects. It's a one-stop shop that we've heard developers, and iwi Maori developers in particular, asking for. A dedicated in-house office integrating these functions could assist council in realising the opportunities for growth and assist us in retaining specialised skills, upskilling all our people, not isolating commercial expertise into one silo. I think this will attract people, not lose them. And it'll attract high-quality people who are reticent at the moment. If we're going to learn from these examples, we've got to change direction. We shouldn't be afraid of making decisions because we don't have every detail implementation. We have more than enough information and almost 300 pages of staff advice, probably not read by most. We should also give our full confidence in Phil as a council CEO. He's already managed a substantial positive structural change involving hundreds of staff that we didn't even know about. And that's in line with the intention of reform. He's provided reassurance and experience of what he's done already to show that he and the council have the capacity, capability and readiness to implement these changes, and they've committed to monthly reporting and appropriate oversight. Through this process, I've read and listened to the views of many stakeholders, particularly interested in those who understand the current model and its limitations. To close, I want to reference a submission made by the PSA of all people as part of a previous budget consultation. According to their submission, their view was that services should, in principle, be retained in-house rather than be outsourced or moved to a CCO. Noting a key issue for Auckland and its members was ensuring that CCOs and other contracted service providers remain fully accountable to the council and to its service users. Those users are Aucklanders, the people who elect us, the people whose rates pay for us, and that accountability should rightly sit with us and the responsibility that goes with it. Okay, now I'm going to move to voting for this. I would like to be clear from the beginning. This is about the operating model itself. This is about how the chief executive will run the place. What I'm seeking to do here is to address concerns about the group's structure. Reform hangs as a package. This isn't a pick and mix buffet of the performance or merit of individual organisations or their staff. A better way, if you disagree, you have two options. You vote against the package, or you record your dissent against individual parts. We've done it before with CCO, with the annual plans, with the LTPs. We're trying to address deep, systemic, structural issues that have been tinkered with for 14 years of well-intentioned piecemeal review of something that was basically wrong at the start. If you remove an organisation from the equation, we won't achieve the outcomes Auckland has needed. So we won't be doing this in parts. We've taken this approach with multiple annual plans and the long-term plan, and I don't accept this as any different. So I'm going to go, presumably we will have a division here, I'm absolutely sure, and you can record against a part, but I'm going to go around and ask for the Sandra with an R to record your vote on item 10.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Bartley.
Against.
Councillor Darby.
I vote for overall. Please record my vote against the disestablishment of Eke Panuku and the transfer of economic development from Tātaki to Auckland Council.
Okay, thank
Oh,
you.
can I be the same, please? What he did.
Councillor Bartley, you're changing your vote from a no to a yes with against on D1 and D2. Is that correct? Thank you. Councillor Ferry.
For, against on D1 only. Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat that? D1 and?
Only.
Thank you. Councillor Filipina.
For, but against Eke Panuku and against the economic development.
D1 and D2. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Foley.
For, but against D1 and D2.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
I made my vote clear in the amendment, but I'll just vote in favour of all in favour.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman.
For.
Councillor Sayers.
For.
Deputy Mayor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
For.
Councillor Turner.
For.
Councillor Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
For A to M inclusive.
Councillor Williamson.
For.
Mayor Brown. That's carried.
20 nil.
It's very
Carried.
close.
Noting all of those
20
clauses
nil.
against.
Oops.
We've been going 4 hours.
Oh, we've been going 4 hours. We have a quarter of an hour, a few minutes break, okay? Try and hold it to 10. And prepare yourself for the excitement of the LGNZ Electoral Working Group.